Yes. Okay, doke. Aloha, everyone. I am Dr. Ellen Carringer. I am on the leadership team for Hui Aloha o Hawaii Indivisible. And before I introduce our speaker, I have a few thanks that are in order. Let me start by saying a huge thank you to Laurie Yamashiro from the United Church of Christ Conference Office for managing the webinar this morning. Without her, we wouldn't be here. So we want to thank Laurie. We couldn't do it without you, Laurie. Thank you. I also want to say a thank you to the Reverend Sherry Dennis and the Lihui United Church of Christ for opening their doors to allow a lot of us on Kauai to gather and to watch the webinar together on a large screen. And also to the Reverend Dr. Allan Akana for his help in organizing this event on Kauai. A big thank you is also needs to go out to the Kauai Justice and Witness Committee of the UCC and also the statewide Justice and Witness Committee of the UCC because they helped co-sponsor this event and we appreciate working with them. And last but not least, I want to say thank you to the Hui Aloha Indivisible Leadership Team, the Reverend Dr. Bob Nelson, the Reverend Dr. Scott Landis, and Reverend David Gerlach for the work, their work in helping bring this together. Also, just a note for everyone, we will have a question and answer time after Dr. Boesak speaks. So feel free to drop questions into the Q&A area below. It's usually at the bottom of your screen. You can type in questions that you have, and he will do his best to answer them afterwards. We might not get to all the questions, but we will do our best because we need to not be keeping Dr. Boesak up way past his bedtime in South Africa. Remembering we've got a big time difference here. Also, if you want to let us know, if you want to know more about any of our upcoming events, please feel free to drop your email into the chat for us. Now, it's always an incredible honor to introduce the Reverend Dr. Allan Boesak. Born in South Africa, Dr. Boesak emerged as one of the most powerful voices against apartheid, not only within the church, but across the world stage. He is a theologian and a global human rights activist who has spent a lifetime confronting systems of injustice. As a founding patron of South Africa's United Democratic Front, he played a vital role in uniting the country's resistance to apartheid, standing shoulder to shoulder with the likes of Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela. His work has been recognized across the globe. He is a recipient of the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award and the Martin Luther King Peace Award. In South Africa, he has received the Order of Luthuli, South Africa's highest honor for contributions to democracy, peace, and nation building, and the King Hinsa Bravery Award, celebrating leaders who demonstrated extraordinary courage in the face of injustice. He has received multiple honorary doctorates from universities around the world, including Yale and the University of Geneva. Dr. Boesak is a prolific author as well. If this is your first time to hear from Dr. Boesak, I think it's also important to let you know that he has been harassed, surveilled, tear-gassed, and imprisoned, but never silenced and never defeated. At a time when we in this country are now racing to save our own democracy, Dr. Boesak's voice is a timely and powerful reminder to all of us of the power of faith and hope in pursuing justice for all people. And one more thing, when I asked him if there was anything he wanted me to include in the introduction, he didn't have me list any of the things I just said, but he did want us to know that he always feels a very special bond with us here in Hawaii, and he has never felt more at home, more welcomed, and more like he was part of the family than when he was here with us in Hawaii. I think he misses us. And let me turn it over to the Reverend Dr. Allan Boesak.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carringer. Good evening, good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be in touch with all of you once again. And Allan is absolutely right. I really do miss Hawaii and our friends there. And so do the rest of my family, because we've had the most wonderful times on the islands and the most wonderful memories that we cherish dearly, that we've built up over the years with all of you. In the times that we came almost every year for 4 years in a row to be with you in Hawaii. So that's the first reason why I am very happy and privileged to be with you here tonight. The second reason is that I've had this relationship with friends and comrades in the United States for over 50 years now. And so everything that I have discovered about the similarities of our struggle for justice and for freedom and for humanity, and the solidarity that we feel with one another in those struggles, that has been building up for a very, very long time. So it touches me very deeply what happens in the US and how things are going there, and especially how the things that are happening in the United States impact what happens in the rest of the world. And so that's the third reason. The first two are very personal. The third is a political reason. I've always, since I've come to know the role of the United States in world politics, because you are such a strong and forceful empire, and has been for the last 80 years or so, since the Second World War especially. I've always sort of felt when the US has elections, those elections ought to be open to everybody else in the world, because what you do impacts so severely on the direction in which the world is going. And so that's a more selfish political reason why I find our conversation tonight such an important conversation. And there's a last reason, I think, and that is that I am so encouraged to notice that ever since this last turn in the political life of the United States and the shock and awe manner of Mr. Trump's re-entry into politics, the wave after wave after wave of things that he has been able to do, um, that has so fundamentally uprooted so much of what you thought were fundamental, foundational, and really, in a way, untouchable, because those things were protected by law and by the Constitution and by the traditions that you built up and by the struggles you have fought and the victories you have won. But Mr. Trump seems to be able to uproot all of those effortlessly. And I sense the shock that went through people like yourselves when you saw this happening. And also because he did it so cleverly, and so quickly and in such a rush, although it's not a rush in the sense that he came into power today and then tomorrow decided this is what he's going to do. My feeling as I watch all of this and as I try to understand what is happening is that Mr. Trump has been working very hard since his first term, with the view that I am coming back into power. And when I get back into power, this is going to be my agenda. So I think he has been preparing what he is doing now for all these years. What he needed was to pull together the right forces to make him successful in the things that he's been doing. I mean, you cannot have all of those executive orders that he rolls out within the second or fourth or fourth day in first week or after his inauguration, without having prepared them for years before, knowing exactly where he was going to hit, what he was going to hit first, and and rolling them out with such a speed that he confused most of the country, overwhelmed just about everybody else except those people in his inner circle who knew exactly what he was doing. He also knew how deep he was going to go. I mean, I have not seen, not even here in South Africa, where we are very unhappy with the way our own politics are going, but I have not seen in a democracy a head of state that is willing to go toe to toe, head on with the courts, that is supposed to be the third leg of your checks and balances system. And with the understanding that in a democracy, those in power will bow down to the final judgment of the courts that are supposed to interpret the Constitution. So he's challenging all of that. It's almost as if he is daring every institution in the United States. I'm going to do this, and I'll see what you do, and I'll see whether you are able to resist what I'm trying to do. So within that context, to come back to where I began, my fourth point for my reason to be happy to be with you tonight is that you are overcoming that first wave of shock. You are saying, we are not taking this lying down. We are not giving up. You are drawing on wells of resilience that I find enormously encouraging. So while we are talking, and Dr. Carringer talks about how I may be able to encourage you, I must say to you that the way in which certainly the group that I'm talking to tonight, the movement that you have been able to build in resistance to what is happening in the United States right now, which in my view is a very direct, unashamed, open form of new fascism that we have to deal with, and how we handle this new reality within the framework of a so-called democracy. That is the challenge. But you have not given up. You have not sat back just to allow things to happen. You have actually said, we're going to find ways to fight back. And that I think is the right thing to do. So what we are doing here tonight is simply to see, can we talk to one another? Can we find ways in which we can encourage each other? Not just me trying to encourage you, but encourage in each other in what has now become the great struggle for the redemption of our humanity across the globe. So it's not just the United States. It is South Africa, it is Africa, it is Asia, it is Europe, it is a global struggle that we are engaged in. And what we have to do is to see where we can find our place in that struggle to strengthen the whole, is to see how our response to issues can be of encouragement to others also involved in the struggle. So that's what we're going to do tonight. And so that's how we approach tonight's conversation. So let me begin by just quoting a man by the name of Helmut Gollwitzer. He was a great fighter against the Nazis, a theologian in Germany at that particular time, was imprisoned for a number of time, and then in the end ended up in a concentration camp, survived that, and became a minister in one of the churches in Berlin, and afterwards also a professor of theology at the University of Berlin. In the early 1980s, he put together a book of his sermons that he preached in that period just after the Second World War. And he begins in his introduction by saying of that time of which he is speaking, that we are living in a world which is in the grip of deadly convulsions. So he was not only talking of the war and what happened there, but of the aftermath of the war. And I found that a very apt description, thinking about that time and thinking about the times in which we live right now, that we are now too, at this point in the 21st century, with what is happening in the world, we are also in the grip of deadly convulsions. And those deadly convulsions can do a number of things. They can totally overwhelm you, make you feel as if everything is hopeless and that we are helpless, or it can stir in you that thing that the reformer John Calvin has pointed out. He says, it is true that the world is a place where oppression and intimidation and war and threats are the things that may rule the day. But he says, and tyranny is always just around the corner, John Calvin says. But he says that the longings that we have for dignity, for our humanity, for freedom, for justice, those are longings that have been implanted in us by the Lord from the very beginning. It's part of our being a creation of God. Being a child of God means that to live with injustice and tyranny and oppression and evil, that is an unnatural way for us to live. That the natural way for us to live is to live in a situation where we seek to create justice, where we seek to protect those things that are precious, love and justice and peace, for humanity and for God's creation. And those things are implanted in us by the Lord, and they cannot ever be uprooted. That's what he says. And so what we have to do is that we have to find a way to almost reconnect or connect for the first time with those implanted things that urge us to do that which is right and righteous and that which is good, for creation and for God's children across the world. And so that's, I think, where we are. And I mean, I don't have to make the case for Helmut Gollwitzer's convulsions that we are in the grip of. You can just look at the wars that are devastating large chunks of the world and of humanity. I'm not only talking about the NATO, US, European, Ukraine, Russian war at the moment, which is devastating in itself, and which almost this very week have brought us almost to the brink of a nuclear confrontation. So that the times in which we live we've never been so close to that conflagration, which will be sort of the final gasp of humanity. And we are still we're not away from the brink yet, we're still there. That is a convulsion that we are all learning how to deal with, because it is so real, and it is so imminent, and it is so absolutely dangerous, because if this happens, then everything comes to an end. So that's the one thing. But there are also, I hate to call them smaller wars, but more wars on a smaller scale. In the Sudan, that has not stopped. There is the war, the civil war in the Congo, that over the last year has cost the lives of almost 1 million people. And it's not really a civil war in the Congo that we are living in. It is the basic fact that the Congo's blessing, namely, that is a country endowed with so many minerals, not just the minerals that we know, the gold and the diamonds and the platinum and so forth, but also the new rare earths, which are minerals that are so unmissable for the things that we live with in our modern society. You can't have a cobalt. You can't have cobalt without, we can't have a laptop without the cobalt. You can't have a cell phone without it. You can't have an electric battery for an electric vehicle without it. And so those are the very things that we now need more than ever before. And because of the abundance of these things in the Congo, it serves corporations from the United States, from Europe, from Israel, from South Africa, to create a manufactured instability in that country in order for those corporations to loot that country of its treasures without ever anything of what the country owns comes to benefit the people of the Congo. So that is a convulsion that has been going on since 1960 and before, of course. But on a scale since that time that has surpassed everything from the past, even including the so-called hidden Holocaust under King Leopold II, which cost the lives of more than 10 million Congolese. So those are the convulsions I'm talking about. And then, of course, the great convulsion that we witness every single day, which is the genocide upon the Palestinians in Gaza, and now including the West Bank and the rest of Palestine. That we have to add on to it the wars in Lebanon and in Syria and so forth. So that is what we see. But there's another convulsion that bothers me and that should bother us, and that is what I call the war upon the poor. And you can see that we have created an economic system that is totally and completely exploitative, extractive, and destructive, especially of those who are on the margins, who are the most vulnerable groups in our society. It's an economic system that we now call neoliberal capitalism that cannot live without that exploitation of those who are most vulnerable. It can't live, for instance, without creating crazy numbers of jobless people. I always find it very ironic that you have a report that comes out that employment figures have gone up, and then the next thing you find a report that says the markets are upset about that. And why is that? If you provide somebody with a decent job, even if it's not a decent paying job, which is where we are mostly with all of our working class people, certainly but that's the creation of a job is a reason for markets to be disturbed, because that goes against the foundational ideology of the system. We have that system which cannot survive, for instance, without this vast gap between the rich and the poor, between the employer and the employee, between a CEO and their workers, the vast socioeconomic inequalities that come with that system. And Oxfam, which is a wonderful source of information, apart from being one of the more successful NGOs in terms of responding to the needs of people in the world. Oxfam has since 2019, but especially since 2020 and the COVID pandemic, brought out a number of reports on the effect of socioeconomic inequalities on our lives in the world, and on, especially, once again, the most vulnerable. And so in one report I have read that socioeconomic inequalities, they have found, the experts have established, socioeconomic inequalities all by themselves. We're not talking pandemics like COVID. We're not talking illnesses. We're not talking diseases. We're not talking famine or floods or things like that. All by themselves are causing the death of something like 22,000 people globally every single day. That means one person every 4 seconds think about what that means. And that is the scale of just socioeconomic equalities. That's a convulsion that the vast majority of people in the world have to live with every single day. So we have all of this. There is a convulsion, but I think in the political order of the world, I mean, it stuns me to see the quality of political leader, if you can call them that we have across the world. I mean, I really see almost nowhere a leader that responds to the highest that politics can call you to do for the sake of building a better society and creating better situations for the vast majority of people in the world. W.E.B. Du Bois, your own intellectual giant um, uh, in the 20th century, wrote about what he called the search for the politics of decency and honesty and integrity and virtue and courage. That kind of politics has almost completely disappeared. So you have leadership without vision and politics without principle, without direction, and always a politics that serves the few at the cost of justice and humanity for the many. So when you get this situation, then of course and it becomes concentrated for people like yourselves, because Mr. Trump, with his policies, cut such a dominant figure in the world, and what he does is on such a large and devastating scale. Now, not just for the world in general, but for people in the United States. And so the question is, how do we respond to all of this? For people of faith, I always think in a situation like that, I think of Psalm 11, where the psalm begins with a question. When the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do? That's the question in the psalm. And the righteous are those people who actively want to do what is right in the world, what they believe God calls them to do in the world that is according to God's will, to make this creation as good as God intended for it to be from the very beginning. To serve and to respond to those longings for justice and fairness and peace and humanity that God has implanted in us at creation. And so what does he do? And in the psalm, there are sort of two kinds of responses. The one response is, and it says, flee like the mountain, to the mountain like a little bird, because you are so scared you can only hide. And you have reason to be, because the wicked are there. They have set their weapons against you, and they will fight you, and they will chase you down, and they will hound you down, and they will tear you down, and they will wear you down until you are nothing. That's on the one hand. And then on the other response that comes from the psalm is the first verse, which the psalm begins with, is, in the Lord I put my trust. And that means not that I put my trust in God and therefore I sit back and wait for God to do everything, but then I say, I am at God's disposal. What is it that the Lord wants me to do? How do I respond to these implanted longings, which means it is God's longings for this world and for the people of this world and for all of creation in this world? How do I respond to that? And so that is what we then do. We don't run, we don't hide, we don't flee, but with trust in God and in what God has implanted in us, we say, we will stand up and do what is necessary at this particular time to do. In Christian language, we call that a kairos moment. In politically, we say you recognize that there is such a crisis, for the world and for my situation, that I can no longer deny it or ignore it or minimize it, act as if it doesn't exist, or act as if it is not the crisis that it is. Um, and it can take amazing depths. I mean, I know, because this happened just this week, I know people, there are some people who hate young Greta Thunberg because of the way she had brought the climate emergency under people's attention in the world. And so this past week, she was on that flotilla, the food flotilla for Gaza, in which they're trying to bring food into Gaza, trying to break the Israeli blockade. And of course, the ship was attacked. And I saw on Sky News, I saw a clip in which the presenter, with a gleeful smile on her face, said something like this: "So Greta Thunberg's little trip to Gaza did not work out that well for her, did it?" And I think to myself, my goodness, the ship was attacked with drones. There could have been serious loss of life. Certainly the food going to starving children in Gaza was stopped. And this woman on television, speaking to millions of people, is gleeful about it. She actually rejoices in the fact that the ship was attacked. And she mentioned Greta's name specifically because she still holds it against her that this when she was still a young girl of 16, actually raised awareness for the other danger, apart from the nuclear danger, that is threatening our world. And so how do we respond to situations like that and to attitudes like that? We respond, as I said, by realizing this is a crisis. We also respond by saying, if it is a crisis, and we recognize that it's a crisis, and we can no longer deny it, then it means that there is something that we must do about it. It is not somebody else's responsibility. It is the responsibility of those of us who are here now, who can see what it means for ourselves and for the world, who no longer try to hide behind the fact that, oh, this is so overwhelming, but realizing that it is only overwhelming because we are sitting back and let these waves of evil roll over us. There must be a way in which we can stand up together and do something about it. We then think to ourselves, because when you realize that there is such a huge crisis that we are facing, you also begin to realize what is actually at stake. Now, for some people, maybe the first response is, what is at stake is democracy is at stake in the United States, for instance, for you. Democracy is at stake somewhere else. But it's much more than democracy, the concept of democracy, the idea of democracy. And I always think of the fact that about 5 years ago, there was this study done by people at Princeton University and Northwestern University in Chicago about democracy in the United States. And they came to the conclusion that democracy in the United States is actually an oligarchy, that it is more the will of the rich and the powerful that government responds to, rather than the will of the people and the needs of the people, and especially what the people deserve, not just what they need, but what they deserve. And then they say, when government actually responds to the people, it is almost coincidental with what the powerful groups want. So it's not just humanity it's not just democracy that is at stake. What is at stake is our humanity. What is at stake is our idea of what freedom really is. And not just freedom for myself, but freedom for those around me. What does it mean to live in a situation where I use my freedom to help guarantee the freedom of those in a more vulnerable situation than I find myself in. And so that is what is at stake. If our common humanity is at stake, that also means that this is not just a national struggle. It's not just a struggle in South Africa. It's not just a struggle in Palestine. It's not just a struggle in the United States. It is a struggle where all of us have to stand together. We have to find ways and means to strengthen those common bonds of humanity, but we have to find ways and means of understanding the ways in which we can encourage and be in touch with one another like we are tonight. And we have to know, whatever I do here, even in my local situation, is there a way in which I can project my thoughts, my ways of thinking, my ways of doing, that it connects to the broader struggle for humanity, and for decency and for dignity and for virtue, and for goodness in the world, as it is right now. And so those are things that we need to begin to think about. Our future is at stake. I'm always struck by the way in which especially young people are being targeted, and are the victims almost of the systems that an older generation put in place. Um, I'm looking, for instance, at unemployment figures in South Africa. Um, Adult unemployment figures and general unemployment figures are something like 45%, which is very high. And I think it's not completely the truth because it's government figures and they have all sorts of reasons to hide the truth from ordinary people and from the public. But if you break that down, in South Africa, unemployment amongst our youth, which is the largest section of our population, is over 60%. And in the urban areas. In the rural areas, it is closer to 70%. I saw something the other day where the statistics now show that 67% of young Black women now in university, when they get their degree, 67% will not be able to find a job. That is frightening, I think. But what that does is that heightens the sense of hopelessness and helplessness in young people. It heightens also the sense of anger. So they tell me to go to school, and I go to school, and I do my best, and I get out of school, and I can't find a job. It's not that I'm a dropout in high school. It's not that I'm a dropout from college or university. I try my best. I pay these high tuitions, and my parents sacrifice, and I sacrifice. And when I get out of there, they now tell me beforehand, by the time you're done within 2 or 3 years, you won't be able to find a job. That raises waves of anger in young people. And if the political system is such that, I'm talking about South Africa now, if political system is such that they see no alternative to make the right changes politically, then the only way out for them is to find a way of giving vent to their anger, which is almost drenched in despair. And we all know where that leads. Because a government that realizes that its population is rising up in anger, but they have no incentive or no purpose or no idea how to change the political system so that it be more just and more humane and more inclusive, then authoritarianism is the only response. Just hitting people with measures of tyranny to beat them down and to make them understand that there is no way out for you unless or until you learn to listen to me and accept whatever it is I do to you. That is an unsustainable situation, which causes the greatest outflow of violence in any situation like that. And I can see, certainly in my country, we're going in that direction because we have a government who has no answers, who knows no way of implementing justice and fairness and creating peace and a peaceful environment for young people. That is a thing that bothers me, and it might be something that bothers you as well. So what else do we need to do? How do we need to respond? I think, and I saw this in what you are trying to do. You are saying, okay, we are not looking just at institutions. We are not just looking at the courts. We're certainly not just looking at politicians or politics. We are reinvesting our hope in the resilience and the courage and the vision of our people. So mass mobilization with a fresh vision of what our society should look like, of what democracy should look like, of what peaceful existence really means, of what political leadership should really entail. That vision is an alternative vision to what is currently our politics and our way of life and our doing things. Um, and getting people together, making people understand how much power there is in making sure that that vision is spelled out, is understood and spelled out by more and more people every day. So when I sat in the broader indivisible conversation the other day, and I heard of the mass mobilizations you are doing, that's how we did it. Um, in the 1980s, when we formed the United Democratic Front, which became the largest non-violent, non-racial movement in the history of the struggle against apartheid ever, we brought millions of people together. And there were thousands of people on the streets in different places, different towns, different little villages. It does not matter, the cities. We had something going on every single week. Because mass mobilization, building up the confidence of the people in their power to articulate and to spell out a different vision that is more in line with their longings and their desires and with their legitimate expectations of life in this world. That is what that does. And so when I see that you're doing that, I think that's absolutely the right thing, because that builds up an understanding that there is a different power at work. There is the power of tyranny, there is the power of threat, there is the power of intimidation, there is the power of repression. That is what governmental institutions often rush to. Over against that is the power of the people, which I saw in action personally in my life, and I have learned so much of that and from that. Now, there's a man in India, he used to be in India, M.M. Thomas is now passed, but M.M. Thomas said that the power that we should be looking for is the power as the vessel of the dignity of the people in finding their own responsibility to shape their own history and to determine their own role in their history and in the destiny of their country, their nation, and of them as a people. And that is what we should be putting as a counter power to the powers that destroy, that is power that will always rule over, that will oppress, and that will diminish people's dignity. So, and I see that you are doing that. And that is, I think, one response. Of course, amongst all these things, and I should come to an end, is also the question of how do we retain hope. And I think in what we are already doing is the signs of the hope that we are talking about. Now, you have a wonderful intellectual in the United States by the name of Chris Hedges, that I admire very much in both the things that he says so often on YouTube and the things that he writes. And Chris Hedges says we've got to be very careful how we talk about hope. He says because, and he says there's a way that Americans talk about hope that is really not hope. He says it's optimism, and it's based on all the wrong things. It's based on sentiment. It's based on the myth of American exceptionalism, the myth of greatness that is untouchable, and the myth of impunity. We can do whatever we like, but it always comes right for us because we are who we are. This is America, we then say. And Chris Hedges says, when he talks to people, the first thing that he wants to let Americans understand is we've got to get away from that way of thinking, because that optimism will take you nowhere because it's built on sand. Those are not real foundations. And when I think about that, I think my way of thinking about hope is the way in which Church Father Augustine, way back in at the end of the fourth and the beginning of the 5th century, how he talked about hope. He said, hope is a mother with 2 daughters. He says 2 beautiful daughters, by the way. The name of the one daughter is anger, and the name of the other daughter is courage. The anger at what we see around us that is wrong, and especially the wrong that is done not just to ourselves, but to others more vulnerable than we are. And then the courage to rise up and do something about that. And he said, that is hope. And so if we can find a way to take our anger and keep it righteous, because we channel it into courage to right what is wrong. So not just undoing the injustices that we see, but at the same time trying to do the justices that we genuinely need to make our situation a better world. That is what hope is. And that is the hope I've always tried to talk to our people about. That is the hope we cling to. And if you have that kind of hope, and your hope is expressed in that righteous anger and in that righteous courage, then we are able to reclaim what it is that we really are. And our people in South Africa and people in the United States have such a rich history of the struggles for what is good and right. I mean, when I talk about Albert Luthuli, who's been our leader that I draw such inspiration from, at the same time I talk about Martin Luther King, because they were both people dedicated to the things that make humanity real and tangible and aspirational and inspirational for all of us. And that is not just my legacy that I draw from, it is yours. I can almost say it is in your DNA. And so if we can reclaim that, I firmly believe that there is nothing stronger than a people that have discovered their own humanity and the reasons why it has to be protected and nourished, and the reason why their own humanity brings about the humanization of the world. And Steve Biko from South Africa, who was murdered by the police, has said this. He says, our task of our generation in South Africa is to work towards the day when we can give the world the greatest gift possible, and that is a human face. And that, my friends, is, I think, what we are fighting for right now. And I hope that that is what is foundationally what will keep on driving you to do what you are doing, because it is righteous and it is right and it is the future. I think I should stop there so that we can talk. If you let me go on, I'm a black preacher, and nobody will have a chance to even ask a question. So let me stop right here and see where we can go with our question.
Thank you so much, Alan. That was enormously inspirational. Remembering what is it that should drive us from the heart. The first question that was handed to me here: how has the current political situation in the U.S. affected people in South Africa? And can you give us specific or personal examples?
You want me to answer the questions as they come, Alan? Okay. Look, as I said, the thing with the United States is whatever the United States decides to do is bound to have an impact across the world because of the strength and the dominance of the position of the American empire in world politics, in economics, geopolitically seen. That is one thing. So when Mr. Trump decided to target South Africa specifically, um, by naming us as a country that he has in mind that should be punished, he then sort of started by withdrawing the credentials of our ambassador and they sent him back. Then he withdrew the credentials of our consul general in Los Angeles, California, and sent her back. Then he withdrew the credentials of our military attache in Washington, D.C., and sent him back. So clearly, he was making an example of South Africa. Of course, there are financial economic agreements between South Africa and the United States. There are about 600 US companies that operate in South Africa. So if he decides to hit us economically, it will have a significant impact of the country as a whole. But then there's a second thing. Then Mr. Trump, under the influence of Elon Musk, then targets South Africa on a very specifically racist thing. He then believes the stories that some white Afrikaans-speaking people are saying, that Black South African, the government, is trying to steal their land, that white people are being persecuted in South Africa, that there is such a thing as a white genocide in South Africa. And then they mention the way in which white farmers are being murdered by Black people. Now then, of course, we know that those are blatant lies. We know that they are also very transparent, because if white people were persecuted in South Africa, there would not only be 49 of them who would flee the country as Mr. Trump's refugees. I mean, they would have filled that private jet, that plane that Mr. Trump hired, that a plane that takes almost 300 people, 49. And of that 49, 9 were members of one family. So you can see, if I feel persecuted, if I'm being attacked, if my life is in danger, and I get an invitation from a country, please come over, we will give you everything, we will expedite your citizenship, we will give you this and we will subsidize that, I will run. But so that alone shows you. But remember, Elon Musk comes from South Africa. Elon Musk's grandfather was a Nazi who fled Germany to come to South Africa. Elon Musk's father had the same political tendencies as his father. He was one of those people who who owned mines in South Africa, and and the mining industry is one of the most exploitative industries in this country, has been since they discovered gold and diamonds in the 19th century. So that's what Elon Musk is. Elon Musk grew up in Pretoria here, and so in his mind, as a child, was implanted all of these ideas about white supremacy and why apartheid is a good thing and why black people are inferior and why it's rightful for white people to exploit and to oppress and to do whatever they want because this is their country given to them by God. But before Elon Musk could actually enjoy that, his parents left the country. And he came to the United States. So what I think he's doing is living out all of those Nazi fantasies that he could not realize in South Africa. He's now doing via Donald Trump, but aimed at South Africa. That's what I'm thinking is happening because there really is no logic behind any of this whatsoever. And also, when our president South Africa's president went to the White House, that was not on the agenda, really. That was the agenda that they put on the screen with the fake photographs that Donald Trump had, things that happened in other countries that he said happened in South Africa. So that's the thing. But what happened? What does that mean, though? If Trump is now targeting people across the world, and especially South Africans, and he is targeting people who have been critical of American policies as it impacts Africa and other places in the world. And he is targeting people who are critical of Israel's genocide against the Palestinians. That means that a person like myself must now ask myself the question, so what if I go to the United States? And so in April, I had an invitation to go to the US and another invitation to come to the US in May for the Festival of Homiletics. But when Mr. Trump began with his targeting of South Africans, I had to talk with my hosts and with friends here to ask the question, if it is true that and we see that it is true, they stop you at the border, they confiscate your phone, they force you to open it. If they see anything on your phone or on your laptop that is critical, any number of things can happen to you. The best thing that can happen is that they send you back immediately on another plane. The worst thing that can happen is that they detain you, send you to some ICE detention center in Louisiana or Texas or wherever it might be, and that you disappear and that they torture you for 19 days like they did to that young German man or to that young woman from Canada that they kept for 12 days. And so my host said, we can't take that responsibility of taking the chance that something happens to you when you've so much work to do in South Africa. And so for the first time, I've had to actually say, because of political reasons, I have to decline the invitation. I can no longer come to the US. And that means that for the next 4 years, I probably will not be able to see my friends and my wife face to face, which is a tragedy, I think. But I mean, it happened to me, and I can guarantee you it will happen to any number of people across the world now.
Thank you, Allan. I'm gonna, for this next one, I'm gonna kind of combine two questions. From Stephen Austin and the Reverend Danette Comp, who you know. During the most painful times you've had to face, have there been any practices you followed or that you currently follow as a routine for maintaining your sense of purpose, your sense of direction, your sense of hope? And a related question that came in from here at Lihui, how do we have hope? In the tradition of Jürgen Moltmann, sometimes I feel hopeless to see things as positive. How do you deal with these painful moments?
Thank you for those questions, and good to hear from you, Danette. I see your face immediately in front of me, And I hope you are very happy where you are right now, because I know you're no longer on the island, they told me. So it's wonderful to hear from you. So let me begin with the last question. I have just said to you that the way I think of hope is the way Father Augustine thought of hope, the anger and the courage. And that is really the only way, because that means that hope is not a theory, it is not a philosophy, it is not an idea. Hope is something that you claim, and something that claims you as you stand up and you do whatever you can to right what is wrong. That is the only way in which hope becomes real. Because if you do that, that means others can find hope in what you do, in the hope that you have. Um, and so, in that sense, hope is not a philosophical idea that I share with others in an article or in a sermon or in a presentation. Hope is an act of love, an act of justice, an act of courage, an act of transformation, an act of change, an act of lifting up people by just simply showing, because I have hope, this is what I am doing, and I will not give up, because hope is the one thing that will not allow you to give up. You may falter, you may find the pressures hard, but if you have that anger and that courage, and knowing that this is what others need to see in me in order for them to continue with what is right in this world, to right what is wrong in this world, and that hope tells you that whatever is wrong in this world can be made right by those who are right in this world and are hopeful. That's the way I think about that. On the other one, that's a more personal thing, of course. And of course, I've had many of those difficult moments. Um, and funnily enough, it's not the moments where I was on the streets leading a march with thousands of people and facing real guns and dogs and tear gas, and so forth, because you could be shot at any time. I mean, I remember a moment in a church service, and we had those prayer meetings. At the time, for people, we prayed for people who were in detention without trial. Um, and the government decided that those prayer meetings are seditious. Not treasonous yet, but seditious, undermining government authority. And I mean, I don't blame them, because prayer can do that. I really. Um, prayer can be a very dangerous thing if you understand that prayer means that I put myself at God's disposal to do what God wants me in the world. That's prayer. Not just closing my eyes and floating up somewhere in the ether and speaking in tongues. No, 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 no. Really doing what you believe is God is telling you. So then prayer becomes a very subversive kind of commitment to justice. And we were in one of those prayer services, and the police came, burst through the doors, and all of these soldiers and policemen lining the walls of the church while we were praying inside. And the guy who was the commander of the riot squad in the Western Cape, I still remember his name, Ockert van Skalkwyk. He came and I was talking, and he said to me, Dr. Boesak, please stop, because I have something to say. This church is under arrest. And you know how it is. I was preaching, and I was saying to him, we are busy with the word of God. Why don't you sit down and listen? So there was a bit of a tussle between him and me. He grabbed the microphone. I grabbed the microphone back. He grabbed the microphone, pulled it out of the socket, and then announced the arrest. This church is under technical arrest. So what does that mean? I say to him. He said, it means that you are under arrest. So, I mean, really? But then he left. But before he left, he gave an instruction to one of his soldiers. And this young kid, he really a young kid, came up to me and held his gun to my head. And I look at this child and I think, oh my goodness, if this kid becomes so nervous that his fingers slip and the gun goes off, what then? So I've had those moments. I've had those moments. I've also had the moment, and that very same day, we finally got out of the church. I got into my car, and the police shot a tear gas canister. In those days, they did not have the bullets, tear gas bullet yet, but a tear gas canister. And they shot a tear gas canister right through my rear window, and it landed next to my seat. All I remember is switching off the car and passing out. And we were in prayer inside, and there were Muslim women standing outside in the churchyard praying with us, but of course they couldn't come into the church, but they prayed with us outside. And those women opened my car door and dragged me out and revived me and saved my life. Um, and so in those moments, I draw courage and so much hope from those women who broke through the police cordon, who disregarded everybody else around themselves, who didn't worry about the guns and everything that was trained on them, and they wanted just to save my life. Um, but not even those moments. But for me, it is, I think, the moments when I was in solitary confinement, all on my own, deprived of everything, where nobody knew where I was, because you don't have legal representation. Your family doesn't know. Nobody knows. Um, and then I fall back always, but especially in those moments, on the courage of my people, seeing what they were willing to sacrifice. But I always find courage in my faith. Now I am a Reformed preacher, like the UCC comes from the Reformed tradition. And we have a document in our tradition that's what now, what, 500 years old? Not, no, a little bit less, called the Heidelberg Catechism, and it divides the whole year into meditations and sermons for every Sunday, so 52. And question 1 is this: what is your only comfort in life and in death? And the answer to that is, my only comfort in life and in death is that I belong with body and soul to Jesus Christ, who is my only Savior. I cannot find words to tell you what that meant for me in those days, because I would know that any time in the middle of the night, or in the morning early, or in the evening, they would come to interrogate me, and you never know what might happen in those sessions. And so your life, in that sense, is no longer yours. Um, but where do you find then the strength to face those interrogations? It's not just a belief in a vague thing called democracy. It is not clinging to something called freedom. It is really digging down into something that you know is much larger, much greater, much deeper than yourself. I mean, my faith was not always as rock solid as I would like it to be. But this knowledge that in this moment I can say, you can do to me whatever you want, but my life, my only certainty is that my life is not my own, but that I belong to Jesus Christ, that in life and in death. So I think about those things and I repeat those sentences in my head all the time when I wake up in the night and I'm too afraid to sleep, or when they take me out and I don't know what's going to happen. So yeah, that's the way for me.
Thank you. That was something that can give us all inspiration and hope and courage in those really tough moments. I'm going to follow up with a question from James Raymond. He had it in two parts. I'll put it together. He said, I'm worried about our lack of coordinated, centralized leadership here. I think he's talking about those who are trying to work towards the preservation and saving our democracy. He said he's worried about the coordinated, centralized leadership to set goals and align strategies. Can you speak to how organizing grassroots efforts took shape in South Africa, and also thinking globally, how do we link arms globally with sisters and brothers who oppose fascism?
Okay, thank you for those two questions. Now, of course, uh, I'm not too worried about uh, not having an organized, centralized leadership. I am more concerned with, can we, by talking together, I mean, somebody has to make the call. Somebody has to say, look, we are hoping to build a movement. Can we meet? Who is interested? Who feels committed enough? Who feels driven enough? Who feels worried enough by our situation, by the crisis we are facing, to say we've got to bring people together. A voice needs to be heard. So that idea must come from somewhere. I have found, when I called for the formation of the United Democratic Front in January of 1983, that what I had in mind, and when I spelled it out, was actually in the mind of millions of people already. They were already thinking about that. They were already trying to find ways to make it happen. They just did not know how to articulate it in a way that would bring people together, that would make people respond. So somebody or some people have to come forward and to articulate that desire and articulate a vision. That's number one. Number two, I'm not worried too much about coordinated leadership. If there are some, I am far more concerned about a decentralized leadership. When we called in the UDF for people to come and join the movement, we said there are already organizations in existence, student organizations, women's organizations, faith organizations, youth organizations, sports organizations, it doesn't matter. There are already organizations in existence. Those organizations already have people in leadership. That means that in your local situation where you are, you actually have had enough faith in certain people to give them leadership responsibilities. It's not my job to come from the top to say, oh, I want to see that person in the leadership and that person and that. No, 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 no. If your leadership can be grown organically from within the communities, having the trust of the communities, having shown leadership by intellectually articulating and by practically leading local actions. Those are always things that go together. Somebody who can articulate, somebody who can say this is, and somebody who can say, can we come together? But local leadership. So every organization kept their leadership. And I just said to them, and so you organize whatever you want to organize, because we now have to make this effort a national effort. And making it national means that you have to have as many local actions as possible. There will come a time when we will make a national call and we'll say, all right, now we've had for a month or for 2 months or for 3 months, we've had these local marches and these local economic boycotts and these local, all the things that we thought would be important and impactful, so that the political and disruptive of the political situation and of the political structure and of the way in which we were governed, and making our voice known in all of these, then we would say, all right, now there's a city there, everybody comes to that point and we have a large march. That is that is the way in which we did that. And so we encouraged local leadership. We just said, make sure that what you are doing locally, every action, every initiative, whether it's a march or whatever it might be, how that connects with a national effort. It'll be our job, my job, Archbishop Desmond Tutu's job, for instance, to make our national issue connect with the international solidarity that we were trying to build. And so that is how you build a movement. And of course, I was in the position, difficult position, but privileged position, that many of these local marches, I was called to come and lead. And that gave me the opportunity to articulate to those local people how important local initiatives were to the national initiative, to the broader effort, and how they must know that they are part of a larger movement that they will see every now and then if we can bring people together in different centers. But that was a way in which we built up local confidence in leadership and local confidence in efforts of coordination. And that we then try to link in many ways. But so in those days, it was much harder because there was no such thing as an internet in the 1980s. There was no such thing as TikTok or whatever talk it is that the young people work with. There's no such thing as WhatsApp that you can, I mean, so one of the wonderful things that I experienced in the United States in 2015, I think it was, or 14, when I was, you remember when Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson? The people of, there was a church that invited me to come and preach. And I said, yes, I will preach on Sunday, but I will do what I did here in South Africa. I will say to them, if I can, I'll come for the weekend. And on Friday, I want to meet with the young people. On Saturday morning, I want to meet with representatives of local civil society organizations because they're all part of the movement. But I want to talk to them separately. I want to hear from them what it is that they see as their priorities and strengthen their understanding of the national priorities. I want then on Saturday afternoon meet all of the pastors who are part of the movement. And then I will preach on Sunday after I had been immersed in what is happening in your minds and in your hearts and in your streets. And how what I say on Sunday will connect with what you have already been doing and help to take you forward. And in that conversation, on the Friday with the young people, one of the leaders, and they had just been, that very week, some of them had been in jail, and they were bailed out by some of the churches on the Wednesday night. And so I met with them. And there's a young woman who, much to my surprise, knew about the United Democratic Front and what we were doing in South Africa. And she said to me, look, tell me, what is it that you guys did to bring down that oppressive government? And so it said to me, number one, that what we do at a specific point in history is not just for ourselves alone. I mean, you leave an imprint, you leave a model, you leave an inspiration for those young people so many years later to say, tell us what you did because it inspires us to do what we're doing. That's the first thing. The second thing that very much impressed me is how they told me that on that Wednesday, when they went to jail and when they were protesting on the streets and the police came, they were on their phones with young people in Palestine who were telling them, this is what you do when you are hit with tear gas. This is what you do when you doesn't. Oh my goodness. And I thought, you see, if we had had that, apartheid would have fallen sooner. So now you have all these tools that does not require a centralized leadership. All it requires is an understanding of a common purpose for the movement here and for the movement abroad. And so if young people in Ferguson, Missouri, can be in touch not just on inspirational thoughts, but on practical tactics and on strategy with young people in Palestine at the same time, it's amazing to me. It's amazing to me. The other thing that I learned, not there, but from young people in Palestine, or was it in Beirut? In Beirut, where they were fighting at one point, and they were telling us how the older generation, people who couldn't march anymore, who couldn't sort of stand in the fumes of the tear gas anymore, who wouldn't really survive a long jail term anymore. But those older women and men were sitting at one place, and somebody had a way to make a concoction that helps with tear gas. And all they did, these older people, all they did was to make that concoction and hand out the bottles to the young people as they marched by. Now, what do you call that? Intergenerational resistance movement coming together? Yeah. But everybody finds a place somewhere in the struggle. Even if it is only, we were in Soweto and we were having a prayer meeting in the church first before we went into the streets. And there were maybe a dozen nuns who were in the streets. There were more nuns who joined in the struggle, in the protest. But there were nuns who said to me, Dr. Boesak, we will not be joining you today. We will stay here in prayer for you. Pray for you that you remain calm. Pray for you that you remain nonviolent. Pray for you that you keep your purpose in mind. Pray for you that you keep strong. That is our job for today. That's our contribution. All of those things are absolutely indispensable to bring the forces of struggle for right and justice together. And so you will find your own ways of doing these things. But don't worry about a centralized leadership. Worry about, can I raise local leadership that can continue to inspire? The central leadership can't be there all the time. You will meet them when you come together. And then all you need is a bit of coordination to make this happen. You can build a national movement. And you can build an international movement through these connections that we have today. As long as people elsewhere know that Americans have not given up, Americans are not lying down, Americans are not saying to Trump, you are too overwhelming. No, we are rising up. We are reclaiming who we truly and really are. And everybody else in the world is getting to know that. That is the important thing. And the rest will follow. You will see organic movements make connections. Organic movements are built up because they cannot be stopped once they start.
Thank you. You let me know. I have 3 here at the moment, and a few more coming in. But let's you tell me when you're getting near the end, Allan, when you must go.
Okay.
I have the next one comes from Kristen Young. She says, mahalo for this. I am grateful for South Africa's solidarity with the Palestinian struggle and for its complaint against Israel for genocide in Gaza with the International Court of Justice. This current genocide in Gaza has been aided by the U.S. under a Democratic president and now the current president. Wondering if you could share about the importance of resisting fascism and genocide abroad as well as at home, and can we expect to do one without the other?
Thank you for that question. There's no doubt in my mind that there is a growing tendency towards a renewed fascism across the world. It always comes hand in hand with authoritarianism, with tyrannical tendencies, with bombast, threats, bullying in all sorts of ways. That is true. But I mean, but who is it? Sarah Churchwell, who quotes Rabbi Wise when she writes about fascism in the United States. She says, when fascism comes to the United States, it will come wrapped up in the flag and in religion. And so that's where you have to look for it. And she was absolutely right. It comes as a form of distorted patriotism, the kind of patriotism they want to inculcate in you that raises no questions, that dares no challenge, because total subservience, total obedience, total acceptance of whatever it is that they try to do is what they want. That's why Mr. Trump is not just fighting resistance on the ground by giving the police all of these amazing powers. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, look, if he says we need to protect our police more than we need to protect our people, that's a sign. That's a sign. If your police do not look like police, but more like an invading army in your cities, that's a sign. If you have what your ICE is doing, not just that they are kidnapping people on the street and whisking them off. That's a new form of George Bush's rendition policies. Only those rendition policies Bush meant for people abroad, not Americans. Mr. Trump makes them applicable to citizens of the United States. So there's this thing that you need to forget. I hope I'm not digressing too much, but when Trump became president for the first time, in 2017, I wrote something for friends of mine in the US, and I think I might have published it elsewhere. I said, look, for us looking from the outside, Trump is not a bolt from the blue heavens out of thin air. Trump is the complete accumulation, the consequence of American politics for more than a century. So you could have seen him coming. And now that it is there for a second time, you have to ask yourself, were Americans so unaware of what he represents? It's not just Trump, I wrote then, but what he brings with him and what he puts in place that will survive him after he has gone. That was 2017. And look where we are now. And so, that's the other thing about fascism and about tyranny and about the Trump way of doing things and about any empire in decline. What the United States have been doing to other people around the world for a century or more, they are now doing to Americans themselves. And you got to understand what this, and we have to have that self-critical ability to understand this before we have the ability to understand what it is that we should be doing against this. So I think there's a rising tide of fascism. If you see what the German government is doing at this moment, if a protest against genocide is now a criminal act in Germany and in a country like the UK, just a few weeks ago, Keir Starmer's police in the UK went to arrest women and young people planning a protest, Quakers, in a worship house. They knew it was going to happen. So they went in there and they arrested those people for planning a protest. Quakers are known for their peaceful protest. So a peaceful protest against the Israeli genocide inflicted on Palestinians. And they are dragged to court. They might go to jail. That's crazy. But that's fascism. When dissent is no longer allowed, that's fascism. When the right thing, the human thing that you do is turned into a criminal thing that you do, that's fascism. When you can no longer preach against what is wrong. Now, in my country, I know what this means. I mean, I wrote a little book with the title, If This Is Treason, I Am Guilty, because what Archbishop Tutu and I were doing, calling for peaceful protest, calling for the non-violent strategy of placing sanctions and boycotts and divestments against the South African government for what they were doing. That's non-violent action. That's peaceful action. But it was treason under South African law. When I was arrested, I'd never picked up a stone in my life, never mind a gun. I always preached non-violence because I was captivated and convinced by the model set by Jesus of Nazareth, by Gandhi in India, and by Martin Luther King in the United States, and by Albert Lutuli in my own country. I was arrested under Section 29 of the Terrorism Act. So when you know that the right thing is turned into something evil, and the evil is turned into something good, then you know what you are dealing with. So these are the signs. And I see them everywhere in the world. It's not just in the US. There is a reason why Mr. Trump and the people around him find such deep connections with other movements in the rest of the world. There is a reason why Mr. Trump thinks that South Africans' white supremacy, that they still want to inflict upon the majority of the people here at home, is fertile soil for him. And so that's why he turns to those people and he makes it clear. What I want in South Africa, in my country, are not immigrants from brown or black countries, but white people from a black country in South Africa. So it's very open. It's not even subtle anymore. So we know the signs are all though, and for that reason, and they have globalized it, and for that reason, we must find ways and means of making sure that we make those connections with each other. And so South Africa's stance against the genocide is the right thing to do. I still fight with my government, even though we took Israel to the International Court of Justice. And I fight with them because we did the right thing, and then because we stopped at the consequences of the right thing, it turns our taking glory for what we did in The Hague into some act of hypocrisy. Let me explain what I mean. When the International Court of Justice made its judgment against Israel and for South Africa, that judgment comes with certain conditions that the court has set. And those conditions say, in essence, that now that we know there is a genocide going on and there are war crimes being enacted, one of the consequences of these findings is that you should no longer have any connection with the perpetrator. That's the state of Israel. You should not aid and abet the perpetrator in any way. So no commercial ties, no trade, no cultural ties, no diplomatic ties. And so we have from the very beginning said to our government, if you do this thing, and if you take Israel to court, you must then have the courage to follow the consequences of your own actions. Cut off diplomatic ties, close the embassy, our embassy there and their embassy here. Cut off all trade ties, do not trade with them. Implement boycott, divestment, and sanctions immediately as law for South Africa. You have to follow South African law, and you have to prosecute those South African Jews who go to Israel to join the Israeli Defense Force to help in the genocide of Palestinians and the killing and the murder of children. You have to do that. And the South African government has done none of that. Why? Because our president is a businessman who is connected to companies who still do business with Israel. South Africa is now, I think, the second largest producer, fueler, conveyor of oil and coal to Israel. They have not stopped that. And I think that is hugely hypocritical. I think it is wrong. I also think it is cowardly. You cannot say to the world, oh, please, please, glorify me because I am the one who took Israel to the International Court of Justice. And then behind everybody's back, you still continue to fuel the genocide in the way that they are doing. With the result that even on this thing, I fight with my government every single day. I have perhaps not a single friend left in the African National Congress by this time. And so yes, but that it is right that we did that, but it is not helping Palestinians. If we are still the number one or the number two seller of coal to Israel in order to make sure that the ADF has all the fuel it needs to continue the genocide. Those two things do not mix. They don't come together. And I think it is to South Africa's shame that the president dares to stand up and quote Nelson Mandela in Parliament, claiming that we are in solidarity with Palestine, because Mandela said, South Africa knows that we will never be completely free until Palestine is free. Now, he quotes that, and then he goes around and his bank account is filled with money that is blood money from the ruins and the dead bodies of children and mothers in Palestine, and he still wants to take credit for it. To me, that is the height of hypocrisy, and I tell him so every single day. I said in a speech publicly, when the minister, our Minister for Foreign Affairs, State Secretary, was sitting next to me on the stage, I said, please tell your president that he is the president of the Republic of South Africa. He is not the president of the Israeli apartheid state, and he should listen to what our people are telling him and not to what his Zionist friends expect of him to do in order to keep business flowing and money coming in for himself and his family and his friends. I tell him that. So, I mean, it's not the way to make friends, but it is the only way I know how to fight for Palestine in my situation here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Boesak. We probably need to wrap it up at this point. And to let Laurie go as well. She's got some other commitments she must get to. So I want to say thank you again to Laurie and to the conference. And a huge thank you to you, Dr. Boesak, for sharing all of your tremendous wisdom. We'll be probably asking to tap you again because we have many more questions here, and we may.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's do that. Let's build a relationship. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. And let me say before I go, I mean, I really, what I said in the beginning, please take it to heart. I am inspired to know that there are so many people in the United States standing up for what is right. You have to redeem your country. And when Martin Luther King talked about the struggle as not just being about civil rights for Black people, it's not just being for the reputation of America as a country in the world. It is to save the soul of the nation. Yes. Please keep that in mind. That is our goal too. And that is why we fought for so long. And that is why we realize that the struggle is not over. But in this new struggle, it is wonderful to know that there are so many people on the other side of the ocean standing up with us, because in the end, it is about humanity. And so thank you so very much for what you are doing. So let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. We shall do that. Thank you very much. We will let you get to bed in South Africa. The rest of us will get started with our day, but this was a wonderful way for us to start the day. Much aloha to you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Goodbye. We'll
Aloha.
talk again.